Hi everyone, my name is Procheta Malik, and we'll do a small discussion on the concepts about this activity, nervous system reaction time, right? You also did the same thing. I love playing with it. Each time I'm like, oh, can I get it better? I'm never able to get better than, say, 5 or 10 centimeters. And this is by me throwing the scale down. So my left hand is dropping it, my right hand is catching it. My brain kind of knows that my left hand's throwing it, so it's able to make that catch. If my friend or someone else drops it from here, the reaction time is bound to be only what I can see, right? So it's bound to be slightly slower than that. The scale will drop a larger distance, right? So it's a wonderful way to actually measure, say, with visual, but you can also measure reaction time when you touch someone, how they react, when you hear something, how you react, when something's coming towards you, that's the visual part, how you react. And why I love this activity is because it's so vital for something like sports, which I love. So I play quite a lot of cricket and tennis, and those sports happen to require you to have very good reaction times, right? So if you have a better reaction time, you end up being more talented playing these sports, okay? And so whenever I've watched sports for the last 20, 25, 30 years, really enjoyed watching and playing. But when I see players at the highest level, I really wonder how they manage to do this. Think about it. A guy serving at 200, 250 kilometers an hour, the one receiving it less than 20 or 30 meters away has to react, has to receive the serve in less than half a second. A batsman playing a fast bowler has to face that ball in less than one third of a second. A slip catcher who's catching the ball has to react and move and be able to catch all those things in sometimes less than half a second. Okay, so for me, that's fascinating. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in this activity when I do this presentation. Before that, I want you to have a quick look at this video, one of my favorite. It's from 21 years ago. None of you would have uh, been there to see it live. I actually happened to see this live on TV. I wasn't there in Australia at the time. But one of my childhood heroes, some of you may have heard of him. He does some commentary on cricket right now. So his name's Mark Waugh. Shane Warne was a great bowler. He's the one bowling. Mark Waugh is the one in the slips. And the batsman is Inzamam ul Haq, the great Pakistani batsman. This test match happened in Hobart in 1999, and Pakistan were on their way to win the game till this catch happened. And look how remarkable this catch is. See how impressed even the commentators are. And it's almost, ooh, there goes the power and comes back. See how amazing amazed the commentators are by this gentleman Mark was. Reaction time or reflex time, right? So just before we start this presentation, I'll show you that short video to start off. So I've shared my screen and we'll get to that right away. Here you go.
And get Australia in as early as possible today so that they can try and get a few wickets on Sunday in case there is some rain on Monday.
Let's go! What a catch! Mark Waugh, that was a genuine late cut off the top edge, and he caught it as clean as a whistle.
That was just a pure reflex job, and what reflexes they are. That really flew from Inzamam ul Haq's bat. He's made very few mistakes in this innings, and this was one of the rare ones. What a brilliant catch to finish it off. That was really flying. The ball was past him. That is unbelievable reflexes there from Mark Waugh. And Inzamam ul Haq is gone for 118. Pakistan 8 for 350.
So wasn't that absolutely remarkable? Even the great commentators there, Bill Lawry and Chappell, extremely impressed by it. Of course, as the players were also quite surprised because, taking a catch like that is quite rare. And quite recently, it was voted as one of the best catches of all time. Okay, so that was just because of this wonderful thing. The reaction time was so short. The guy had to move quite a bit to his right, dive, and when he took the catch, he was in the air, one-handed. Everything about it was remarkable. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I'm so fascinated by this activity. and by how our brain works. So we won't look at the demo since you've just played with and made the activity. We'll move to the next slide, which is about the observation sheet, right? So here your observation sheet starts with this lookup table. And why are we talking about this lookup table? It's because it's converting this height. So if you let this thing fall, you are measuring the height each time, right? So if I look at the next table, you're asked to put in the number of centimeters that have fallen on the scale in the time that you dropped it from. How far did you catch it? So that's what you're measuring. And this lookup table tells us that if the scale starts from a stationary position and falls down, if it goes down 10 centimeters, then the time taken is 10 centimeters is the distance, and the time taken is 143 milliseconds. That means 0.143 seconds. Okay, so this is a lookup table. In later classes, you learn how to, if something's falling, if it starts from rest and it goes a particular distance, you can actually calculate that distance. Here this table is giving you those values, so you don't have to calculate it. So it makes your life a little bit easier. So if the scale has come to 15 centimeters, for example, that means that your reaction time was 0.175 seconds or 175 milliseconds, right? So for each stimulus, you've been asked to do it 3 times, okay, and calculate the average of those 3. So for example, for auditory stimulus with our right hand, okay, this was the readings that we got when we did the trial. 35 distance of 35 cm, 24 cm, and 26 cm. The average of that was 28 centimeters, and so our average reaction time, if we look up 28 in this table, okay, 28 corresponds to 239. So 239 milliseconds was our reaction time. Similar was with the left hand for auditory stimulus. What does auditory mean? For our hearing stimulus. For visual stimulus, like for the scale dropping, there we got these results, and so the reaction time slightly quicker. For touch stimulus, we found that for left hand, for one of my colleagues, happened to be faster than the right hand, the stimulus. But these are the kind of readings we got. Okay, so you measure the distance the scale falls, and then you calculate by looking at the lookup table, the time that it corresponds to. Okay. So as per your observation, which stimulus has the least reaction time? Okay, so you've all filled up the observation table. In your observations, which one ended up having the least stimulus time? So was it the auditory stimulus, right hand, auditory stimulus, left hand, visual right, visual left, touch right, or touch left? Okay. So stimulus is something that is done to you. So any change in environment or change in condition is called a stimulus, and you're responding to it, that's your reaction, right? So it's the difference in time between when that stimulus acts versus when you act, that is your reaction time, right? So where was that reaction time the least? That is, where was your reaction the fastest? Give you 5 more seconds to answer this. This may be a bit subjective, the answer, but there is a particular one that tends to, on average, for people be the quickest reaction time. So we'll stop the poll there, and it so happens that 5 or 6, that is the touch stimulus, is when we react the fastest. So if something hot touches us or someone touches us, then our reaction times are quickest. If someone says something to us, then it's actually among the slowest, right? And the visual stimulus is somewhere in between. Typically, that's what happens on average, but it could vary from person to person, and it should or could vary from left hand to right hand as well. Okay. What do we infer from this? If the distance noted on the ruler is more, that means the catcher has what? So if the distance is here versus distance is here, okay, so if the ruler has fallen more, that means the catcher has slower reaction time, faster reaction time, or zero reaction time. What does it mean? Okay, so 5 more seconds to answer this one. So we'll close the poll there, and yeah, so if the ruler's fallen more, it means it's taken more time, right? So your reaction time is slower, right? So it is the first one. Which of these is not a reflex, meaning an involuntary response? So which of these is not a reflex response? So again, I'll give you 10 seconds for this. Moving hand of something that is hot, is that a reflex or a not? Sneezing, is that a reflex or a not? Picking up a book, is that a reflex or not? So which of this is not a reflex? Okay. 5 more seconds for this. Yeah, so we'll close the poll there. If something hot touches you, you automatically react without thinking. Sneezing usually happens when we actually need to sneeze. People are not typically sneezing deliberately. But picking up a book is something that you probably think about and then pick it up, right? So it's third answer here, which is the correct answer, that picking up a book is not a reflex action. The other two are reflex or involuntary actions that the body does, okay? So you could think of the nervous system, the collection of nerves that go all over our body, very much like our arteries and veins that transport our blood all over our body. So that's called the circulatory system. Similarly, we have bones all over our body called the skeletal system. Similarly, we have nerves all over our body, and that's called the nervous system. Okay, and so you could think of that as another set of highways in your body, and this is where the brain sends, so the brain controls all our nervous reactions, and the brain sends and receives information about what's happening in the body and around it. So if you get a very hard stimulus, someone pokes you, something's very hot, something's very loud, something's very close, fast, then those are the things that stimulate our brain even more, and we react quite a bit more. Okay, so it's these signals that the brain receives, and it responds to those, either sensing danger or for whatever reason, and the brain responds, and that's the reflex action, and the time taken to respond is the reaction time, right? So our nerves are part of this nervous system. When we're talking about sense organs, what all do we have as our sense organs, and what are the stimuli or the stimulus that it can respond to? So, for example, our skin responds to touch and responds to temperature. So if someone touches you, then you feel it. If something is hot or cold, then you react to it. So those are a couple of things that our skin can feel. Our tongue can taste, of course, and what's the stimulus? It's the chemicals in the food that cause different taste. So, for example, something that is sweet, the nerves in our tongue that can sense that sweetness or salty or any of these tastes, right? And so the different chemicals produce different taste in our mouth, and that's why we have a tongue to be able to taste the food that we eat, right? Our eyes sense light. That's the pretty much the only thing, both color as well as the brightness, the intensity. Okay, so light is what the eyes respond to. Ears respond to sound, soft, loud, high pitch, low pitch, all that. Okay, so the ears respond to sound. The nose, smell. Okay, so quite similar to tongue. It's you can think of the tongue and the nose in that way, almost sometimes work together. That's why when we eat food, both the taste and the flavors of the food produce such strong emotions in us and reactions in us when it comes to tasty food, not very tasty food, and so on, right? Those two are working in tandem. So the nose also smells chemicals, vapors, gases that enter the nose, and the nose also has sensory glands that send signals to the brain, and the brain is able to kind of distinguish that smell. So so again, nose, very very interesting and important job. So remember, we talked about the time between a change or an event and the response is called the reaction time. The measurement of how long it takes for the brain and the nerves to react to an event. Okay. So in the case of this ruler falling, here we are looking at the visual response. The Brain sends a signal that the ruler started falling, and then that signal goes to your brain. The eye sees it, the signal goes to the brain. The brain then sends a signal to your hand and has your hand catching it, and that whole thing takes, of course, a fraction of a second, but it's not zero time. Okay, there is some time it takes, and sometimes you drop the ruler as well, right? So sometimes reaction time is not good enough. You can drop a catch. Yeah? What are the various factors affecting reaction time? So age is one of them. It tends to be the best when we are just after our teenage years. When we are aged about 20 to 30 is when we have the best reaction times. So it's not a surprise that all elite athletes, sports people, and so on, their peak performance happens in that age bracket. And then once they go beyond 30, 35 years old, the performance tends to drop. Okay, so age is one of the major factors. The dominant hand, whether it's right or left, whichever it is, typically would have the better reaction time. The dominant hand would. Fatigue affects your reaction time. So if you're tired, if you've not had enough sleep, if you're not well, uh, then your reaction times are worse. So, for example, drivers on whom a lot of life depends because they're driving a car or a bus or even train loco pilots, etc. They're all, if they're asked to have good rest, okay? So, if they're overworking themselves, then they're putting other people's lives at risk. So, fatigue slows down your response time, uh, which is another reason why they tell you not to, why they tell people not to drink and drive, because alcohol also affects your reaction time. You just tend to be doing things slower and gets impaired. So that's why you're told to not do that when you're driving, uh, and so on. So there are lots of things that affect it. The intensity of the stimulus affects the reaction time. So if something is very loud, then you will end up reacting faster. If people are talking very softly, then your reaction time won't react as fast. Similarly, when it's hot, when it's something is very hot, very cold, very loud, very fast. So those are the times that your reaction times are also reduced. You react faster. So the intensity of the stimulus matters. A distraction would cause you to lose reaction time. So, for example, talking on the mobile phone while driving. Very, very bad habit, much more dangerous than most other things people do while driving. And but people continue doing it and cause a lot of accidents on the road because people are distracted. They're on the phone, so then they're not seeing what's actually outside, and they react slower. So that can be a major uh, distraction that causes an increase in your reaction time. Okay, illness like fatigue typically causes slower reaction time. Warnings, so warnings will increase the reaction time. So will decrease reaction time. You'll react faster to things when there's a warning that's there. And practice. So you might think that, say, you saw Marquardt taking that catch. Do you think he would be able to do that without having practiced for years, for decades, playing cricket, catching in the slips? Probably not, right? So practice can improve your reaction time. You keep playing, you keep doing the scale thing, and you'll see that your reaction times improve. And we do that when we play games, when we do any activity. The more we do, we improve at it. So in sports where, for example, reaction time is very vital to your performance, you play more, it will improve, right? So practice does improve and does make perfect. Okay. And you can see that some of these may have an impact on the auditory sense, some may be visual, or any other as well. What does increased reaction time mean? Your reaction time is how long it takes for you to react. We've talked about that. Higher reaction times means it takes you longer. Good sports persons will have very fast reaction time. What's the average reaction time in humans? So when it's a visual stimulus, about quarter of a second. Okay. Here it says audio stimulus was better than visual. So that's so some people, I guess, on average, this is the case. And touch is also very similar to audio, about 0.15, so about 1/6 of a second for audio, and touch stimulus. For visual, about a quarter of a second. Okay, those are average. It changes from person to person, but that's just to give you an idea. There are various explorations you can do in this activity. So I'd like you to try some different things out. Try the same experiment with the scale dropping. Try it in dim light when the light is quite faint, maybe with a candle light. Try it. Does your reaction time increase or decrease or stay the same? I hope you can try that. Try it with different people in your household. You have done it. Can you make your sibling do it? Your parents do it? Your grandparents, if they're there? Someone who's younger than you, much older than you? Friends, neighbors, whatever? And see if their reaction times are different and it depends on age or not. Compare the scores after practice. Do this 100 times. Do it over 10 days and then see your reaction times and see if they have improved. And of course, you can compare with parents and so on, as I said. So that's the same age thing with the explorations that you can try with this activity. Okay. So another quiz question. Which of the following changes shows an increase in the response time in our scale drop test? Okay. Which of the following changes shows an increase in the response time? That is, your reaction is slower in our scale drop test. It could be multiple answers that may be correct. So choose your correct answer. Which of the following changes shows an increase? So does increasing age show an increase in reaction time? Does repeating the test multiple times increase the reaction time? Does background noise or some distraction increase the reaction time? Does using a longer scale increase your reaction time? Which of these? I'll give 5 more seconds for that. Yeah, so we'll stop the poll here. And as we discussed, increasing age does increase reaction time. Doing the test multiple times would probably reduce it. It should. Practice makes you better at it. Background noise, which is a distraction, we've talked about that will also increase the reaction time. And of course, using a longer scale, okay, that has no impact, right? I'm using this 1 foot 30 centimeter scale. Even if I did it with a 15 cm one, it shouldn't change my reaction time. So 1 and 3 are the correct answers here. Remember I showed you mark for fielding? In cricket, while fielding, who needs to have an extremely fast reaction time? Is it the bowler? Is it the slip and close-in fielders? Is it boundary fielders? Or is it the infielders? So people who've not played or seen cricket, the bowler is the person who bowls the ball, the one who comes and throws the ball. The slip and close-in fielders are the ones like you saw Mark Waugh, you saw the wicket keeper right behind the stumps. Anyone who's pretty close to the batsman, what they say is typically within 10 meters of the batsman. Then the close-in fielders are the ones who stop the nearby runs. So they are usually within 30 meters of the batsman. And the boundary fielders are the ones who are at the edge at the 4 boundary line. And that's usually anywhere from 60 to 80 meters from the batsman. So which of these need to have very fast reaction time? The bowler herself or himself, the slip and close-in fielders, or the boundary fielders, or the infielders. There's 5 more seconds for that one. This maybe should be an easy one if you've even saw the first video. Yeah, so we'll close the poll there. And it is, of course, the slip and close-in fielders. They need to react very fast while fielding. Of course, the batsman herself or himself needs to have a very quick reaction time as well. Knowing average response time used as data to decide how long metro door will stay open. So these are some real life connections that we use reaction times for. Visual reaction time is very important for drivers, pilots, security guards, etc. So they go through tests and exams to test that. Like sports players, very important for these people on whom a lot of people's lives depend. Okay. Response time is something that's reaction time plus movement time. So this is what happens when a gun is shot and then the runners start to move based on that stimulus. Okay, so there again, very important. So when we're talking about the Olympics, where the gold medal is won within a point 0.1, 0.05 seconds, and so on. Sometimes the person who reacts the fastest is able to actually win the gold medal, right? So it's very important for them. response in animals and plants. There's lots of stimuli that they respond to. So a sudden pounce of a predator, prey animals fight back or run away. Loss of balance before a harmful fall. So when we are about to fall, we do something, we put our hand out so that we don't break our something that's more vital to us, bang our head, for example. So we protect that with our hand, which may get injured, but better than our head. So that's also a reaction. Touch me not plant, you touch it, it closes its leaves. The plant is also reacting to stimuli. We know plants turning themselves to the direction of the sun, responding to stimuli. There's other very more complex things. So these are immediate stimulus, your reflex action. There are ones like, for example, there's this famous Russian scientist called Pavlov, okay, and he did this experiment with his dog. He would always ring a bell and then give the dog food, okay. So that ringing of the bell and giving the dog food got ingrained in the dog's brain as, oh, whenever the bell rings, I get my food. So it starts salivating, right? It gets starts taking out its tongue, and it gets the saliva on its tongue, and that's what happens when we are all hungry, right? So whenever he heard the bell, the dog would react by getting its tongue out and coming very eagerly, wagging its tail towards the food. So what Pavlov did was, after doing this for a few months, or maybe I don't know how long he did it for, but it's a famous story. You can read about it. He stopped. He didn't bring the food, but just rang the bell, and the dog would still have the same reaction. So even without the food, the association of the bell with the food is the uh, is a what's called a conditioned reflex. So it's not something, if someone throws a ball at you, whether you're conditioned or not, you will respond and react to it. But if someone rings a bell, you may not be getting very hungry and salivate, but that dog ended up doing it because it associated the two, because it's gotten used to the fact that the bell and the food is happens at the same time. So some very interesting things that go beyond just a simple stimulus and reflex action right away. You also can learn a stimulus or a reflex action, and sometimes that becomes vital in our day-to-day lives as well. Okay. So these experiments are done by scientists. Typically, to a human, they won't do such an experiment, right? Where they ring a bell and see if they react to being hungry or not. So anyway, we learn a lot from these experiments that have been done, maybe 100, 200 years back. Nowadays, we do simpler ones like this that you've done in your home itself or in the classroom, and they're very easy, simple to do experiments. We'd love to hear more from you about uh, what you have learned from this. If you have any questions, you can share it here. Please ask questions. My colleague will be happy to answer them for you, and we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Okay, goodbye.
Hey, what are you doing?